Hello friends, and welcome to Kerbal Space Program 101. Today we have episode 3, Landing and Rendezvous. If you're here from episode 2, welcome. I'm going to provide some chapters right after the screen that should tell you exactly where you should go if you're looking for very specific details. Otherwise, go ahead and continue with the video. This one should be a little bit shorter than the other two. My apologies for that. By the way, on with the show, shall we? Ah, look at you. You've made it to the moon. Congratulations. I also see that you may have built a lander. Even better. Now I've got a few bits of advice here, and I hope you follow them well. Otherwise, your vain attempt at landing might end up being a one-way trip. Now I take it your map view is going to look something like this, with your lander and your mothership in orbit around the moon. Now it's very important when deciding where to land that you are, 1, on the day side, and 2, have radio contact. You also need to make sure that your orbital plane is pretty much the same as your mothership, if you're doing Apollo style. Apollo style being that there's a mothership and a lander that dock and travel separate. Now, first part is to pick a spot, and that's relatively easy. Just make sure that you have radio coverage, you have daylight, and I think we're going to pick right there. That seems like a good spot. Nice and flat, and doesn't have any slopes. Now, you're going to make sure that you're going to orbit around the MUN and make sure that you're almost at that spot, but not over it exactly. Now, before we do any landing, I want to go over a little bit of review. We know that orbits consist of 2 components, vertical and horizontal velocity. You can see right there the most apparent is horizontal velocity, as we are traversing across the horizontal plane of the MUN. But also, if we look to the side, technically we're also falling. Remember, weightlessness is not because we've escaped gravity. Weightlessness is because we're falling too fast to catch up. Now, with this taken into account, a great tool to use is MechJet. I'll cover towards the end of these tutorial series how to install mods, but go ahead and pull up landing info if you have it. Kerbal Engineer also provides this, and you'll see true altitude, vertical speed, and horizontal speed. When landing, you are resting both surface horizontal and vertical speed. When landing, you also want to make sure you have enough delta V. You can see there on the stage number 2, we have about 1500 meters per second of delta V. That's a little bit much, but I do like to be safe rather than sorry. And now that we've done all of our checks, everything is good, our landing engine is armed, go ahead and turn on SAS if you haven't already, and select retrograde on the left, or just maneuver your lander to retrograde. And now, we're ready to land. Now, against all your impulses, don't burn retrograde, use stability to assist pointing retrograde. Then, ignite your engine. You'll notice the camera changes. Now you're in free mode, which generally means that you're about to crash. You'll see that your orbital path is terminating at the surface of the moon. This is good. Keep doing that until the point reaches about where you want to land. Not quite, just about. What's there? You need to keep in mind that the moon is going to be rotating, and you're going to be moving while you are going down towards the surface. The orbit marker says you're going to land there, but in fact, you're actually going to land a little bit ahead of where you're going to land. And to note as well, at that point, you're going to be going very fast horizontally and vertically. That's called a crash, so you're going to land a little bit before where that marker is. Now we're going to go ahead and turn on our engines here because no better time than the present, right? You'll notice down here at the nav ball, we've still been pointing the same direction that we've been the whole time, but now the retrograde marker is starting to trail upwards towards vertical. That's because you're arresting your horizontal speed while keeping your vertical speed the same. You can tilt upwards a little bit, just so that you can slow down vertically while also arresting your horizontal speed. Just keep in mind that when doing this, you should probably reduce your throttle just a little bit, because if anything, if you've built a good lander, it should have a positive thrust-weight ratio when descending onto the moon, or any other body that you're landing for that matter. Now you can see with the retrograde marker, I kind of overshot the ball a little bit, but that's fine. Now you can see our horizontal speed is only about 5 meters per second, while our vertical speed is descending at about 60 meters per second. I'm going to keep the engine on because 5 meters per second is still pretty substantial at the surface, and you can see it's now ticking down very slowly, but it's ticking at about the same rate as our vertical speed. Because the horizontal speed is at a lower value mathematically, it should be completely arrested by the time that we're drifting down to the surface at about 20 meters per second-ish, somewhere in there. Once all of your horizontal velocity is arrested, you're now at the point that us professionals like to call terminal descent. You'll know when you've reached this part of the landing when your vessel is perfectly vertical. Now, all that's left to do is to make sure you don't crash too hard. This process requires the vigilant monitoring of nearly all of your information panels and simultaneously, gently, using the controls. You can see that our surface velocity is about 66 and increasing, and our vertical speed is also that. So, at this point, whatever is reading right there above your nav ball is your vertical descent speed. You'll notice on my MechJeb landing info panel, suicide burn countdown. A suicide burn is waiting until the last second to ignite your engines to full power to minimize the extra delta V required to land. Thankfully, we've over-engineered this lander, so we don't need to do so. Increase your throttle, and do it by the feel of your spacecraft. Every spacecraft is different. You may not need to throttle all the way. You shouldn't have to throttle all the way. But do not throttle all the way unless you absolutely have to. This process should take the longest, and you are delicately balancing your fuel consumption with your burn rate. You don't want to go too slow, or otherwise you'll burn too much fuel. You don't want to go too fast, or well, you'll become a new crater. At this point, a great reference is the shadow of your lander. Using that, you can roughly determine about where you should be according to the surface. But this information is not dependable. About 30 meters per second for this lander in particular is a good approach speed. You can see here, we're now going a bit slower. By the time we start reaching about 300 meters, we should consider staying right around the 20 to 15 meter per second mark. I've decided to go the safe route, and truly, for your first landing, you should probably go the safe route as well to maximize your chance of success. At this point is the most tense part of any landing, the final few hundred meters of landing. You should only be feathering your throttle ever so slightly, and the shadow will become more apparent as you get closer and closer. You might even see some dust coming up from the surface. Throttle up just a bit more. If you're 10 meters from the surface, you should be going about 1 meter per second thereabouts. A bit more, and right when you retouch the surface, cut off. Shut off your SAS, your RCS, everything. You've done it. You've made your first landing. Oh wait, there's more. Of course, that's a MUN mission without going EVA and doing some scientific things, right? So make sure you do that. You've got about 2 options when you come out. You can do an EVA report, and then you can also do a surface sample. Once you get those things over with, you can do some other things too. Run around, take some photographs. This is your first moon landing after all. But I'll be thoroughly disappointed if you don't plant your flag. Look, Doing so, you even get to mark down your own personal little achievement with a tiny little plaque that you get to place next to the flag. In case anybody else happens to land around in that same spot to try to beat you or something. I don't know. Just make sure you do so. Okay. And now once we're all done, we're going to go ahead and grab onto our lander here, and then we're going to climb up, and we're going to re-enter into the capsule. Just going up. I don't really like that tension there. Something's going on. Wait, no. After that little slight issue, I managed to get myself back upright, and now we're gonna actually go back this time. Drake 1 is orbiting at 15 kilometers, and they are orbiting prograde. So that means, because of the Boy Scout rules that we remembered when we were kids, right, that eastward, which is 90 degrees north, is prograde. Now that we know where we're going, when we're going, and how fast we're going, it's time to go. So we're just going to take off here. We're going to point ourselves towards 90 degrees, and you can see we're on target mode, and you can see that maneuver node point there reads retrograde. And oh no, Savvy-Slev cheats on. His credibility is ruined. The entire validity of this tutorial is over. What is he going to do? I'll get over it. I had cheats on. I'm sorry. Yeah, fine. Forgive me, I guess. It happened. But you can see here I'm still getting perfectly valid information, right? We're intercepting Drake 1 here, as you can see, by 2.8 something kilometers. Well, in order to do that, we need to do a little bit of orbital maneuvering that we used in the last episode. Just like the cold, harsh reality that I hate to face that is called life, I'm going to try new things here, okay? And so are you. You're going to point towards the blue side of the nav ball and burn a little bit, and if you go further away, point to the brown side and do that. That's called burning radial in and out by eyeball. Once you do that, pretty much just burn normal, burn again, and you can see the nodes are getting a little bit closer. And once they get close enough, just don't burn anymore. You're pretty much close enough there, and besides the rest of it we can manipulate with RCS thrusters. So now just go ahead and point prograde and just coast along. And that means point prograde when you're in surface or orbital mode, not when you're in target mode. Please, I beg you, don't crash into your own ship. You can see it right there. Point retrograde. I almost ruined this tutorial for a second time. No. Once you're at the point where you have gotten emotionally comfortable enough to handle reuniting with your mothership after several long hours on the surface of the MUN, ignite your engine and perform a braking burn. Make sure that your nav ball guidance is set to target, and just keep burning until the target reaches 0 meters per second. You might experience a lag spike when the craft renders in. Don't worry about it. It's fine. Once you've done this, congratulations, you have done the Rendezvous. Now it is time for approach and docking. In order to make a good approach to your target, usually you're going to end up using RCS thrusters to manipulate the velocity of your craft in slight motions. Now the issue here is that the lander, it wobbles when you try to translate, so the best thing that we can really do is we're going to go ahead and separate the descent stage so that the center of mass is more towards the fulcrum of the center of thrust. Once we've done that, you can see down there at the nav ball, we centered our prograde vector to overlay with target, and then we just propel ourselves forward with a few puffs going prograde towards the target. And now it's just a gentle coast for the next kilometer or so. Now, once we've arrived, we keep our spacecraft steady, and we keep the prograde vector as centered as possible, and hold down the N key to brake until we reach 0 meters per second. Now that we're parked close to our mothership, we need to orient ourselves in a position that would help with docking. Now, when I first was learning how to dock, I was really frequently confused because I would ask myself, how would I know how to angle my spacecraft? And a lot of people will just answer that you simply eyeball it. But I have a bit of an easier way to do that. So what you're going to do is you're going to switch to the other craft, and if possible, you're going to tell it to basically go in the direction of either orbital, retrograde, or prograde, depending on where you're oriented, and then tell your lander to do the opposite. Now, no matter where they're located in the orbit, they will always be facing what would basically be parallel and anti-parallel. Once you've done that, you can use your translation keys, the I, J, K, L, H, and N keys, to translate the spacecraft to an appropriate angle to actually dock with the mothership. Now, you can, to an extent, do this flying by eye, as long as you know the orientation of your spacecraft. From here, we're just going to propel ourselves backwards, basically, or laterally in the negative Z direction. Once we've done that, you can see on the nav ball the target indicator is slowly creeping towards the starboard side of the vessel indicator. You can see there the prograde marker will actually tell you basically what direction the purple node is going. The purple node is your target node. The prograde vector tells you what direction opposite that purple node is going in. Once you've done that, and the vessel marker lines up with the target marker, you can press caps lock, and that'll turn on fine controls. That way you don't release huge puffs of monopropellant, but instead just do small, little tiny puffs here and there, and make it a little bit easier for you to navigate. Then once you get within about, I'd say about maybe a meter, half a meter or so, the magnets on the docking ports should engage, and you've automatically docked with your spacecraft. Well done. Now that we've made it to the surface, we've ascended from the surface, and we've docked with our mission spacecraft, we can now leave the lander module behind and make the trek back to Kerbin. Using the skills that you've acquired in this episode, you should be able to translate your spacecraft away from the lander module to prevent collisions, and then once you've gotten far enough, as long as your maneuver is properly timed, burn to escape the MUN. And that concludes today's episode of KSP 101. I hope you all enjoyed. It's been a fantastic time making these tutorials, and I hope that they've been helpful to everyone that has watched them. The next tutorial is going to cover interplanetary transfers and methods of re-entry from alien atmospheres and things of that nature, before we start going into more advanced topics such as aerobraking and whatnot. Until then, this has been Savius, signing off.